Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no other, 'cause Jesus is the way.
Today we have a very important task to accomplish. We need to come up with a model for Bible-based life coaching. And if we're going to call it that, what do we need to do? Base it on the Bible, right? So where in the Bible are we going to find a good model of that? And I'm going to suggest the best, most detailed model that we have in the Bible and Bible-based life coaching is the story of Elijah coaching or discipling Elisha. So if you turn in your Bibles, let's look at 1 Kings 19:19. Now, as we go through each one of these stories today, I want to point out different steps that were taken in the coaching, and we're going to develop an overall 12 steps to coaching. And so you want to watch these. As we go through, every time we hit another step, I'm going to show you what this step is, and I'm going to show you what the person actually did to see this happen. 1 Kings 19:19. So he, that is Elijah, departed hence and found Elisha. And Elisha's name means God is salvation. The son of Shaphat, which means he hath judged, who was plowing with 12, and the number 12 is the government of God. That means he's under authority. Yoke of oxen. Oxen are capabilities. Before him, and he with the 12. What I'm doing there is what's called type and shadow interpretation of the Bible. We want to get every little bit out of it to understand what is going on here. So what is the first step? In coaching, the first step is you have to establish the relationship. Would you agree that Elijah had to find Elisha if he is going to coach him, right? The second step we call self-evaluation. What is that? You got to determine, is this a client? Is this somebody you can really coach? Is this somebody that's actually going to work out and be able to fulfill the ministry that they're called for? Later on in this lecture, we're going to look at some situations and we're going to find out that all people you coach maybe don't meet this criteria, and if you pick somebody to help that really doesn't have a call or has particular flaws in their character, you're going to have a lot of problems, and the coaching might not come out the way you want it to come out, right? So what does this say? Here is a guy. He has a call in his life. He's judged himself. He's looked at himself. He has good experience, right? He's under authority. And he's a capable person. He already has a business enough that he's got 12 yoke of oxen that he's the foreman over. What are we looking for when we're doing this coaching? We're looking for someone that's a reasonably mature Christian, that's under authority, that has a call in their life, that is going someplace and is reasonably capable, right? What's the next thing we have to do? We have to find the dream. And let's see what he does there. And Elijah, this is 19b, and Elijah passed by him and cast his mantle upon him. Now what's a mantle? A mantle was a symbol of authority, a symbol of a calling in those days. Prophets wore mantles. That's how you could sort of tell that they were a prophet. So by casting his mantle on him, what is he saying to Elisha? Do you want to be a prophet? I'll coach you. Count the cost. Because what does the Bible say? If you're going to build a building, what do you need to do? Count the cost. Verse 20. And he left the oxen and ran after Elijah. What does that tell us? He's interested. And said, let me, I pray thee, kiss my father and my mother, and then I will follow thee. And he said unto him, go back again, for what have I done unto you? What's he saying? if you're not going after this thing with everything you got, and you want to go back and spend some time with your father and your mother, and you're not willing to forsake your father and your mother for this call in your life, forget it. See, is he begging him? When you're trying to find somebody to coach, should you be begging them? Should you be trying to talk them into this? And notice what he did. And he returned back from him and took a yoke of oxen and slew them. What's he doing? The oxen were his capabilities. He's not relying on his own capabilities. And boiled their flesh with the instruments thereof, the methods of his work, of the oxen, and gave them unto the people, and they did eat. What's this saying? He's willing to give up everything he's got and use it for other people. Is that a good sign for being a prophet? Yeah, it is. He's doing the right things here. Then he arose and went after Elijah and ministered, that is, served unto him. Do you see? Elisha, by doing all the things that he did, was counting the cost. He was willing to put everything behind him and pay whatever cost it was to be discipled, wasn't he? And now we have to have a plan. And we get this plan laid out again in type and shadows. This is our step number 5 we call make a plan. Now we're going to jump down to 2 Kings 2:1. And it came to pass, when the Lord would take up Elijah into heaven by a whirlwind, that Elijah went with Elisha from Gilgal. Now Gilgal normally stands for the church. The first thing is, he started from the church, didn't he? So if you're going to disciple somebody, especially to be a prophet, where do they need to be? In the church. They need to be dedicated to that church under authority. And Elijah said unto Elisha, tarry here, I pray thee. See, is he begging him to follow him even at this point? Not at all. For the Lord has sent me to Bethel. Now Bethel stands for the house of God, or God making himself known to his people. So what's one of the steps of somebody in this coaching? You're going to have to get to know God, aren't they? And Elisha said unto him, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. So they went down to Bethel. What's going to happen if this coachee, person being coached, decides he doesn't want to do this, or he doesn't want to do this, or he doesn't want to follow the person coaching him, he doesn't want to do what's suggested? Forget it, right? So that's act according to the plan. Next one we're going to call overcoming discouragement. Verse 3. And the sons of the prophet that were at Bethel came forth to Elisha and said unto him, knowest thou that the Lord will take away thy master from thy head this day? And he said, yea, I know it. Hold ye your peace. What's her saying? Hey, you're going to be on your own. He's leaving you today. What's he saying? No problem. The next step we call remain faithful. See, even when things don't go right, you remain faithful. And Elijah said unto him, Elisha, tarry here, I pray thee, for the Lord hath sent me to Jericho. Now Jericho is a city of palm trees, and it normally stands for a vibrant Christian life in the midst of adversity. So what is the person being coached going to have to go through? Adversity. There are going to be struggles to this thing. Don't think there are not going to be people that are going to discourage you. Don't think there are not going to be people who say that you can't do it. Don't think there are not going to be people and things that go wrong. But if you want to go through this coaching process, you're going to have to remain faithful. Remember that the coach is helping the person being coached through all of this, right? And he said, as the Lord liveth, and as my soul liveth, I will not leave thee. So they came down to Jericho. And Elijah said unto him, tarry, I pray thee here, for the Lord hath sent me unto the Jordan. What does the Jordan stand for? Jordan means descender. I'm going to suggest to you something that I want you to really remember. When does the devil attack ministries? Just before they're about to occur, and just after you come into your ministry. Why does he do that? Because that's when you're the weakest. That's when you're not as stable. That's when he can probably knock you over, right? And he said, as the Lord liveth, and as my soul liveth, I will not leave thee. And the two went on. Verse 7. And 50 men of the sons of the prophets went and stood to view afar off. Notice what happens to other people who are not being coached. They stand afar off, looking at you, developing your ministry, wishing they were doing it, right? And the two stood by the Jordan. Now we call this one, number 9, overcoming the obstacles. And Elisha took his mantle and wrapped it together and smote the waters, and they were divided hither and thither, so that they too went over on dry ground. So what is the coach's job before he has set the person being coached free? Help the person get over these obstacles. He took his authority, he takes his mantle, the power that he has, and he slaps the water, and the waters part. A miracle. See, a lot of people don't realize this, but when things really aren't that hard, because the coach is taking all the hits, and the coach is the one that is doing and helping you get through all of these things. The next one we call own the vision. This is number 10. The client's going to have to get this for himself, isn't he? This is now verse 9. And it came to pass that they were gone over, that Elijah said to Elisha, ask what I shall do for thee before I be taken away from thee. And Elisha said, I pray thee, let a double portion of thy spirit be given unto me. And he said, thou hast asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if thou see me when I am taken from thee, it shall be so unto thee. But if not, it shall not be so. See, what's the thing about coaching that's different than just taking a class? There's something that is caught rather than something that is taught. You'll find that almost all the really powerful ministries were passed on. The mantle was passed on by the person coaching to the person being coached. And that's what he's talking about here. If you see me, if you stick with me like glue, if you learn what I'm like. In the fellowship that I was discipled in, there's this one man that's a good friend of mine, and he was a black man, and the pastor got this call, and my pastor's name was Ron Jones. And this is what the guy said. I have just seen a black Ron Jones. Because he had caught so much of what the pastor was like that when this guy was out ministering, they could tell who he had been discipled by because he acted and did everything just like the person that had coached him. The next thing is accept the mantle. Verse 11. And it came to pass, as they still went on and talked, that behold, there appeared a chariot of fire. That stands for the invincible power of God. And horses of fire. God's resources. So what are we trying to get here? The power of God and the resources of God. And parted them both asunder. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. What do you think about that? How do you think Elisha is looking at that? Wow. But that's the potential, isn't it? And Elisha saw it, and he cried, my father, the chariot of Israel, and the horsemen thereof. And he saw him no more. And he took hold of his own clothes and rent them in two pieces. What does clothing stand for normally? Character. Saying, I'm not going to be like that anymore. I'm being transformed in my character. He took up also the mantle of Elijah that fell from him, and went back and stood by the bank of the Jordan. So as he accepted the mantle, do you see that? The mantle fell down. He now picks up that mantle. Verse 14. Verse 14. And he took the mantle of Elijah that fell from him and smote the waters and said, Where is the Lord God of Elijah? And when he also had smitten the waters, they departed hither and thither, and Elijah went over. So what's going on there? He now has the mantle, doesn't he? And that was step 11. We have one more step. I'm going to suggest to you that you haven't fulfilled the calling until you pass it on to the next generation. So number 12 is pass on the mantle. And we're going to pick up another story here, because can we agree at this particular point that Elijah has succeeded in passing on the mantle of his ministry or coaching Elisha, right? And by the way, Elisha went on to do twice as many miracles as Elijah did. Okay? But now, what is his job in step 12? He needs to find somebody and disciple him to pass this on, right? And these next models, we're going to look at what not to do in the way of coaching. Okay? And let's pick up now in 2 Kings 4:12. And we'll be talking about a guy by the name of Gehazi, and his name means Valley of Vision. What would that suggest to us? His vision is sort of a valley. It's not a mountaintop, is it? And he said to Gehazi, his servant, Call this Shulamite. And when he had called her, she stood before him. So what is that? That's first establishing the relationship. What relationship did Elisha have with Gehazi? That of a servant, which is perfectly valid here. But notice something. Where's the self-evaluation? Do we see anything in the Bible about Elisha evaluating Gehazi before he takes Gehazi on to be the person he's discipling? We don't see that, do we? We skip right over to finding the dream. Verse 14. And he said, What then is to be done for her? And Gehazi answered, Verily she hath no child, and her husband is old. And let me tell you something, if you don't understand types and shadows, some of the most important things that are there is the story within the story. This is another one of those stories within the story about coaching. Okay, what's it saying? The baby is what? Your dream. And here Elisha is saying to the Shulamite, I will fulfill your dream. And he said, About this season, according to the time of life, thou shalt embrace a son. And she said, Nay, my Lord, thou man of God, do not lie to thy handmaid. Why is she saying that? She's saying, don't tell me something because it might not work out. I so desperately want a child. Don't tell me I'm going to have a child if I'm not going to have a child. And don't tell me I'm going to have a child if the child's going to die. So verse 17, And the woman conceived, and bare a son at that season that Elijah had said unto her, according to the time of life. But look what happens in verse 20. And when he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees till noon and then died. Do you think there are going to be some dreams that maybe die? Some that don't work out, that you might have this dream in your life and you might go to your grave without seeing that thing fulfilled in your life? Is that a danger of having the hopes that maybe you can be coached and come into everything that God has for you? Of course it is. But here again is where the coach comes in. And remember that he's coaching Gehazi now. So the woman comes to Elisha, and when she came to the man of God to the hill, she caught him by the feet. But Gehazi came near to thrust her away. What does that tell us about Gehazi? Does he really care for people? He doesn't really be bothered, does he? And the man of God said, Let her alone, For her soul is vexed within her, and the Lord hath hid it from me, and hath not told me. So the next thing we have to do, we had the finding the dream, we've now counted the cost, we now make a plan. So here's the plan. Then he said to Gehazi, gird up thy loins, and take my staff in thy hand. Staff stands for authority. And go thy way. If thou meet any man, salute him not, and if any salute thee, answer him not again. Lay my staff upon the face of the child. Saying, Gehazi, I'm going to give you your chance. Here's your chance. Go and raise this boy from the dead. How do you think Gehazi is feeling? Yeah, wow, let's go do it, right? Then act according to the plan. And Gehazi passed on before them and laid the staff upon the face of the child, but there was neither voice nor hearing. Wherefore he went again to meet him and told him, saying, the child is not awaked. Number 7, overcome discouragement. How discouraged do you think Gehazi is? Here he thought he was going to do this great miracle, and he tries it, and does it work for him? See, not at all. And when Elisha was coming to the house, behold, the child was dead and laid upon a bed. That's verse 32. Verse 44. And he went up and lay upon the child, and put his mouth upon his mouth, and his eyes upon his eyes, and his hand upon his hands. And he stretched himself upon the child, and the flesh of the child waxed warm. And then he returned, and walked in the house to and fro, and went up and stretched himself upon him. And the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. So how did the coach help the person? He went up and demonstrated how it was done, and he raised this child from the dead. Number 8, remain faithful. Let's see how Gehazi does in remaining faithful. We come to another situation, and this is the situation of Naaman the leper. And this is in 2 Kings chapter 5, starting with verse 10. And Elisha said to the messenger, and this is probably Gehazi, unto him, in talking about Naaman, saying, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and thy flesh shall come again to thee, and thou shalt be clean. And after that happened, and he was clean of his leprosy, verse 15, and he returned to the man of God, he and all his company, and came and stood before him, and said unto him, behold, now I know that there is no God in all the earth, but in Israel. Now therefore I pray thee, take a blessing of thy servant. But he, that's Elisha, said, as the Lord liveth, behold, whom I stand, I will receive none. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. Why? What's the whole issue here? Are we to use our ministry for self-gain? We're not. But notice verse 20. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, behold, my master hath spared Naaman this Syrian, in not receiving of his hand that which he brought. But as the Lord liveth, I will run after him and take somewhat of him. Verse 23, and Naaman said, be content, take 2 talents. And he urged him, and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags, with 2 changes of garment, and laid them upon 2 of his servants, and they bare them before him. What do you think of this? Is this being faithful to the ministry? Number 9, overcoming obstacles. Verse 25. But he went in and stood before his master. This is Gehazi. And Elisha said unto him, whence comest thou, Gehazi? And he said, thy servant went not whither. He's lying to his coach. Is he overcoming the obstacle? No, he's not, is he? Now, how about owning the vision? This is what Elisha says. Is it a time to receive money, and to receive garments, and olive yards, and vineyards, and sheep and oxen, and men servants, and maid servants? In the middle of your discipleship, is this the time to be looking out and trying to get money and rip off the people you're ministering to? See, this is a time he's supposed to be accepting the mantle, isn't he? How well is he doing accepting the mantle of this ministry? Not at all. Verse 27, the leprosy therefore of Naaman shall cleave unto thee and unto thy seed forever. And he went out from his presence a leper as white as snow. What's sin? Missing the mark. Has Gehazi missed the mark of discipleship? See, don't get this idea just because anybody that you can disciple and they'll be successfully in ministry, can you? What's the problem we're dealing with here? This time it's a character flaw in the person being discipled. And what's that warning us? We need to be careful who we take on and disciple. Because they can blow the entire thing, can't they? See, the fellowship I was a part of, they discipled many, many people to be pastors. Did all of them make it? Absolutely not. But some did, and that's what this is all about. And then he's supposed to pass on the mantle. Well, Gehazi didn't even get the mantle. Do you see what happened? Even somebody as great as Elisha needs to learn how to coach, doesn't he? But in this case, it wasn't what he did that was wrong. It was the person being coached that caused the overall problem. And what do you end up with when you fail in coaching? Go to 2 Kings 8:4. And the king talked with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, tell me, I pray thee, all the great things that Elisha has done. Were there any great things that Gehazi did? No, the only thing he could do with his life is remember all the great things that his coach did. And it never got passed on. So can you see, we're going to have to really learn how to coach people correctly, aren't we? Because if we don't, and if we don't select the people that we coach correctly, it may not happen, and your vision and what you have and your mantle won't be passed on to the next person. Let's look at one more story. Okay? And these are all stories of ministry coaching today that we're looking at. This is another very familiar story. It's in 1 Samuel 1:11. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid, and remember me, and not forget thy handmaid, but will give unto thy handmaid a man-child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. And so we establish a relationship first, don't we? What's the relationship? This mom, Hannah, is saying to God, I will dedicate my son unto you for the ministry if you'll simply give me a son because I'm barren. Second step, self-evaluation. Verse 20. Wherefore it came to pass when the time was about that after Hannah had conceived, that she bore a son and called his name Samuel, saying, because I asked him of the Lord. And verse 28. Therefore also I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he liveth, he shall be lent to the Lord. And he worshiped the Lord there. So what do we have? Is this a guy that's qualified? Well, as far as we know at this particular point. So we've done the self-evaluation. It looks like this is something that's called of God, that God is involved in this. This guy's probably going to go someplace. Find the dream. It's very interesting here when Hannah comes and takes Samuel and presents him to Eli, who is going to be the coach here, to take care of him and bring him up and coach him and disciple him, that she gives a prophecy. And it's a very interesting prophecy because it actually goes far beyond anything anyone even knew in his time was possible. Listen to that prophecy. 1 Samuel 2:1. And Hannah prayed and said, my heart rejoiceth in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth is enlarged over mine enemies, because I rejoice in my salvation. Verse 8. He raised up the poor out of the dust, and lifted up the beggar from the dunghill, to set them among princes, and he made them inherit the throne of glory. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he shall set the world upon him. Verse 10, the adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Out of heaven shall he thunder upon them, and the Lord shall judge the ends of the earth, and he shall give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. What's interesting here? There wasn't even a king in Israel at this point. And he's saying this boy is going to go up to strengthen the king. And they didn't even have kings. But see, this is the dream, isn't it? The mom has the dream at this particular point that this man is going to rise up to be this great prophet who is going to strengthen the king of Israel. They're going to defeat the enemies of Israel and do great things. So as this boy is growing up, do you think that his mom might be talking to him about this? Where do we get our visions from sometimes? From our parents, but hopefully from God too, right? Count the cost. What is the cost that Samuel has to pay here? How do you like to lose your family when you're barely a little kid and be brought up in the temple? Verse 11, and Eliakah went to Ramah to his house, and the child did minister unto the Lord before Eli the priest. Verse 18, but Samuel ministered unto the Lord, being a child, girded with a linen ephod. And the child Samuel grew on and was in favor both with God and also with men. So he had to pretty much give up his childhood because as a child he was being discipled to be a priest of God. Make a plan. 1 Samuel 2:35. And I will raise up a faithful priest that shall do according to that which is in mine heart and in my mind. And I will build him a sure house, and he shall walk before mine anointed forever. That's what God is saying that he is going to do. Acting according to the plan. Number 6. Verse 19. And Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and did let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Israel from Dan unto Beersheba knew that Samuel was established to be a prophet of the Lord. Now comes the discouragement. Do you see, interestingly, how these all follow the same pattern? Do you see, we've gone through, this is the third story now, and guess what we've done? We've gone through these 12 steps, and they're all following the same basic pattern as they go along. And that's what you're going to find in the area of coaching, is that coaching is going to follow the same basic pattern. But what is the discouragement? Well, the discouragement is that the sons of Eli, who were supposed to be the next priests, were sleeping with the women, and they're ripping off the people for food, and they were all gluttons. But how do you think Samuel felt about that? These are the people discipling him. 1 Samuel 4:17. And the messenger answered and said, Israel is fled before the Philistines, and there hath been also a great slaughter among the people. And thy 2 sons also, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God is taken. And it came to pass, when he had made mention of the ark of God, that he, that is Eli the coach, fell from the seat backwards by the side of the gate, and his neck brake, and he died. For he was an old man and heavy, and he had judged Israel 40 years. So what happened right in the middle of the coaching? Everything is disaster. The ark of God, the very presence of God, is taken by the enemy. The 2 priests to come are killed. And the coach is killed. He dies. Would you say that a little bit of a discouragement, maybe? Remain faithful. What is Samuel going to have to do? He's got to step in and take over, doesn't he? 1 Samuel 7:3. And Samuel spake unto all the house of Israel, saying, If you do return unto the Lord with all your heart, then put away the strange gods and Ashtoreth from among you, and prepare your heart unto the Lord, and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hands of the Philistines. So he stands up, and he's not going to quit, is he? He's going to be faithful even though all these disasters and all these problems came right in the middle of his coaching. He picks up the ball and runs with it. Overcoming obstacles. Then the children of Israel put away Balaam and Ashtoreth and served the Lord only. He had to remove those obstacles to his ministry. Own the vision. Verse 10. And as Samuel was offering up the burnt offering, remember he's a priest. It's his job to do burnt offerings, right? The Philistines drew near to battle against Israel. But the Lord thundered with a great thunder on that day upon the Philistines and discomfited them, and they were smitten before Israel. And then accept the mantle. And Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life. So even though the coach was aside, even though this coach didn't do a very good job, could we agree? Samuel still accepted the mantle. But now we got a problem. Because what you don't do well doesn't go on. Number 12, pass on the mantle again. 1 Samuel 8:3. And his sons, that is Samuel's sons, walked not in his ways, but turned aside after lucre, and took bribes, and perverted judgment. Exactly the same thing that Eli's sons had done. See, what did Samuel learn? All the good things, but he also learned some of the bad things. He also didn't discipline his sons, just like Eli didn't discipline his sons. And then all the elders of Israel gathered themselves together and came to Samuel and to Ramah. And they said unto him, Behold, thou art old, and thy sons walk not in thy ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all of the nations. And the story goes on, then King Saul was raised up. Samuel supported King Saul like it was prophesied. But what happened? He wasn't able to coach his own sons. He wasn't able to pass this on to the next generation. So this case is a failure of what? The coach. If you've got stuff in your life, can you take the people you're coaching beyond where you are? And if you have problems and character flaws in your life, what is going to happen? They're going to get passed on to the people that you're coaching, right? So what does the Bible say? Let's sort of conclude with this. This is in Matthew 7:3. And thou beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considereth not the beam that is in thine own eye? Or how wilt thou say unto thy brother, Let me pull out the mote that is in thy eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eye? Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote that is in thy brother's eye. In other words, you as a coach, get your act together first. Don't go out and try and tell other people what to do and lead them when you have certain character flaws and problems in your own life, because what's going to happen? You may try to avoid it as much as you can, but those things can easily pass on to the person you're coaching, can't they? So we have an obligation, don't we? Now in this class, what have we seen? We've come up with these particular 12 steps. Let me go over them one more time. We actually break them into 3 categories that I haven't mentioned so far. The first category we call dreaming. That is that you've got to get a hold of the dream. Okay, and we break that into establishing the relationship, self-evaluation, finding the dream, and counting the cost. At that point, what do we have? We figured out what the person's dream is, haven't we? Then we make the plan. And we're going to be teaching you how to do all of these things in the classes that come after this. And we have to have a plan of how we're going to get from point A to point B, right? From this dream to seeing the dream fulfilled. Then we have what we call supporting. Supporting is where you're now helping that person take the steps that they need to take according to this plan. And the steps that are acting according to the plan, overcoming discouragement, remaining faithful, overcoming obstacles, own the vision, accept the mantle, and pass on the mantle. So we're going to be looking at that in the sessions after this, though. We're going to be, just like we did here, going through some more Bible examples, only be talking about other types of coaching, like executive coaching, leadership coaching, and business coaching, and then life coaching. How are those things all different from ministry coaching that we looked at today? Now, what is the caution? That there is a method, and it does work. And it can really help people and take them and bring them into ministry and whatever they're called to do powerfully. But there are two major obstacles. One would be character flaws within the person you're coaching. The other would be character flaws in your own life. And these particular things can mess up everything that is going on here. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you. That's your method, Lord, to disciple, to coach, to help people, to take them alongside and make them all that you've called them to be. And we ask, Lord, that you would help us, Lord, to deal with our own character flaws, to be careful on who we do coach, and that we would be successful, Lord, of leading other people to become everything that you've called us and them to be. In Jesus' name, amen.
Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no other, 'cause Jesus is the way. Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no other.